I tried to train my husband by withholding intimacy until he did what I wanted. Now he wants a divorce. What can I do? 5 years ago, I met the perfect man. Yes, literally perfect. The kind of man you see in those cheesy romantic movies on Netflix. Tall, handsome, intelligent, affectionate, and incredibly attentive. I don't mean to brag, but from the moment I met him, I knew I had won the lottery in love. Something few women can say these days. Our relationship was so perfect that even I sometimes wondered if it was real or if I was daydreaming. At first, everything was wonderful. We understood each other beautifully without needing to say much. We shared everything from interests to goals, and even small everyday problems were easy to solve because we always tackled them together. We never fought over silly things or had unnecessary drama. In fact, we always laughed when we saw those couples who lived fighting and making up every 5 minutes. Our intimacy was also something out of this world, spontaneous, fun, and natural. I really couldn't complain about anything. Well, at least not until a few weeks ago. It all started when I decided to join some free courses offered by my city's community center. The idea was simply to socialize a little since I'd been living here for a couple of years after moving to be with him, but I never really had the opportunity to make friends. Everything changed when I joined these courses and met this small group of women who seemed very nice. We became friends almost immediately, sharing experiences, going out for coffee after classes, and of course, talking about our husbands. I must say that at first everything seemed quite innocent. We were just having fun chatting about everyday things. But little by little, the conversations became much more spicy and daring. In one of our talks, one of the women commented very happily that she had managed to train her husband to do whatever she wanted by using intimacy as a reward. At first, I laughed, thinking it was just a joke or an exaggeration. But when I saw that the others started nodding in complicity, I was surprised and honestly somewhat intrigued. One of them, Sarah, the most shameless of the group, proudly told how she got her husband to buy her a very expensive purse that she had been wanting for months. She said with a mischievous smile that she simply refused to give him any action for a whole week until, desperate, he gave in to her whim. Another friend, Jennifer, said that she convinced her husband to completely remodel their kitchen, a huge expense that he initially didn't want to do. Her strategy was to offer him special intimacy each time he gave in a little. According to her, her husband didn't take even 2 weeks to accept the deal and start with the renovations. I was a little surprised, but I must admit that I was also intrigued. I thought that maybe this wasn't so bad and I could try it just once, just for fun. Plus, they constantly insisted, telling me things like, "All women do it this way. It's easier to live." And, "If you can take advantage, you take advantage." The truth is, I began to feel a little pressured. After all, these were my first friends in this country, and I didn't want to be left out of the group or seem too innocent or moralistic. So out of curiosity, I decided to try it. The first time was something small. I wanted a necklace that I'd been wishing for, and normally my husband would have agreed quickly. But this time, I wanted to put into practice what I had learned from my friends. I casually let it slip that there would be a special reward if he pleased me. And to my surprise, my husband accepted, delighted. It was very fun, and I admit that I felt powerful and satisfied with the result. The next day, my friends were happy for me, celebrating my little victory as if I had won a war. I began to feel that I could really get more out of this technique. My friends, excited, pushed me to try even bigger things, assuring me that this is how you build a win-win relationship. With each attempt, the demands kept leveling up. The next thing I tried was asking him for a weekend at an expensive hotel, to which he initially resisted. I told him clearly there would be no action until I had a confirmed reservation. At first, he was a little surprised, but he ended up giving in. The girls were fascinated with me again, and I felt like I was finally part of the club. However, inside me, a strange discomfort began to emerge. I wasn't sure that this was as fun as they said. As the days went by, I saw that my friends were going further and further with their husbands, and that began to worry me. One of them directly boasted of having gotten a new truck just by blackmailing him with intimacy for a whole month. Another one said that she now had total control of her husband's finances thanks to this technique. I began to feel insecure because that wasn't what I wanted. My husband was a wonderful man, and I didn't need to manipulate him to get things. But again, I felt peer pressure to continue. My last test was asking for something big, something he really didn't want, to change our car. He was convinced it was an unnecessary expense, but I insisted. And again, I used the intimacy technique. This time, however, my husband's reaction was completely different. For the first time, I saw him truly upset and offended, even hurt by my attitude. I honestly know that my husband isn't stupid. He's never been. From the beginning, when I started with this training, I noticed that he accepted with a certain degree of humor, almost as if he saw it as an innocent game between us. At first, he seemed to be entertained by the dynamic, and I thought everything was under control. But the more times I did it, it was obvious that he was beginning to feel strange. There were several occasions when his look was different, less happy and more uncomfortable, as if wondering why I needed to resort to those odd tactics when before we simply talked things over. When it was already clear what I was doing, the inevitable happened. One day, I went too far, insisting on the matter of changing the car, and that's when he exploded. I remember perfectly the way he looked at me. It was a mixture of disappointment and anger I had never seen in his eyes before. It hurt me deeply, but instead of retracting, I made the biggest mistake. I defended myself in the worst way possible. He looked at me fixedly and said seriously, "Now you're using sex as a weapon to manipulate me? You think I'm an idiot you can control like this?" I clumsily tried to justify myself, saying something like, "Love, relax, it was just a joke, something I read somewhere. Don't take it so seriously." But he shook his head and his expression hardened even more. "A joke? Do you really think playing with my feelings and treating me as if I were your toy is funny? It makes me feel used. This is not what we are. This isn't who we were." I panicked when I heard him say that. I didn't want to accept that I had damaged something between us, so in my embarrassment, instead of recognizing my mistake, I ended up arguing even louder. "See? You can't even talk to me anymore. Everything offends you. Everything bothers you. I don't even recognize the funny man I fell in love with anymore." He remained silent for a few seconds, clearly hurt by what I said, until he finally answered firmly, "I don't recognize the woman I fell in love with either, and if you keep behaving like this, the best thing would be to get a divorce." For the first time, I felt that my husband, who had always been there supporting me, didn't understand me at all. The word divorce echoed in my head like a bucket of cold water. I simply couldn't believe what I was hearing. How had we gone from being the perfect couple to this? How had something that seemed like an innocent game ended up destroying everything? In the days that followed, the atmosphere at home became unbearable. We barely spoke to each other, and when we did, it was only about practical matters. Who would buy groceries, who would pay which bill, nothing more. I tried several times to approach him to fix things, but he avoided me. He spent more time in his office or out of the house, and when he was around, his expression was so distant that it hurt to look at him. I began to realize how much I had messed up, but my pride wouldn't let me admit it completely. Part of me still thought he was overreacting, that it wasn't that serious. Meanwhile, my friends kept insisting that I shouldn't give in, that he would come around eventually. But deep down, I knew something had broken between us, something that maybe couldn't be fixed. One day, after another one of our cold silences, he sat down in front of me with a serious expression and said something that froze my blood. "I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think we need to separate for a while. I need space to think about whether I can continue with this marriage or not." My heart sank. Separate? That wasn't what I wanted at all. I tried to plead with him. telling him I would change, that I wouldn't listen to those stupid ideas anymore, but he just looked at me with tired eyes and said, "It's not just about that anymore. It's about the fact that I can't trust that you won't manipulate me again. I feel like I don't even know who you are now." Those words destroyed me. I wanted to scream, to cry, to beg him not to leave me, but I couldn't find the words. I just nodded silently as tears streamed down my face. That same night, he packed a bag and went to stay at a friend's place. I was left alone in our apartment, surrounded by the silence and my own guilt. The next few weeks were the hardest of my life. We still talked occasionally about practical matters and logistics, but the emotional connection we once had seemed completely severed. I stopped seeing my friends from the community center. I couldn't stand to hear them anymore. I knew now that their advice had been poison, and I had been stupid enough to drink it willingly. I tried once more to reach out to him, to really talk and apologize from the bottom of my heart, but his response was devastating. "I'm sorry, but I don't trust you anymore. You revealed the most valuable thing we had, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you the same way again." Hearing that was crushing. I realize now more than ever that I ruined something wonderful by following stupid, superficial advice from people who clearly didn't understand what it meant to have a healthy relationship. And even worse, I realized that I did it without any need. I had a happy marriage. I had a husband who loved me deeply, and I threw it all in the garbage for wanting to belong to something I didn't even understand. In my desperation and probably driven by my own wounded pride, I made the worst possible decision. Remember how my friends had mentioned that one of their male acquaintances was interested in me? Well, a few days ago, in a moment of desperation, I accepted to go on a date with him. I'm not proud of this, but I wanted to feel wanted again, even if it was just for a moment. Besides, I wanted to try to forget all the chaos I had caused in my marriage. The date was at a simple cafe. The guy was attractive, I'll admit, but from the first moment I noticed that his intentions were quite superficial. He didn't seem interested in getting to know me. He just wanted to talk superficially, flirt, and see if he could get something quick. I knew perfectly well what he wanted, but in that moment I was so disappointed in myself, so desperate to feel something again, that I agreed when he invited me directly to a hotel after coffee. I won't go into too much detail because it's not really worth remembering, but yes, I can say that after that day, I haven't heard absolutely anything from him again. He literally just disappeared from my life as soon as we left there. My friends confirmed it to me later, laughing uncomfortably, that he had told them there was no chemistry and that's why he decided not to look for me anymore. To be honest, that hurt me a lot. Even though I knew I shouldn't have done it, I at least hoped that meeting would make me feel less miserable. But it only made me feel even emptier. The worst of all is that I feel so guilty about what I did. I tried again to get closer to my husband, this time with sincerity and real repentance, but he doesn't want to know anything about it anymore. I told him that I was willing to do whatever was necessary to recover our relationship, but his response was devastating. "I'm sorry, but I don't trust you anymore. You destroyed the most valuable thing we had, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to look at you again like before." I'm trapped at this point in a strange country, in a house where I'm no longer welcome, and completely alone because those so-called friends not only made things worse with their terrible advice. Now I know that I should never have listened to them, and that I should have relied on what I had at home instead of trying to turn my relationship into something it wasn't. I'm writing this not only to vent, but also to warn other women who might be considering listening to similar advice. Value what you have before you lose it over nonsense. Right now, I don't know what to do. I feel desperate and lost, and the only thing I wish is that I could go back in time and not have ruined my marriage. But since that's impossible, I can only accept my mistakes and find a way to move forward, although I have no idea how to do it. Do you think there's still any possibility of getting my husband back, or is this now completely finished? I really need your advice now more than ever. Well, Here I am again. This time from the airport with my life in a suitcase, waiting for a departing flight within a few hours to take me away. I'm officially going back to my parents, divorced. Yes, just as you read it. What started out as a perfect marriage ended up becoming this, and I honestly still find it hard to believe. My husband finally made his decision. To be honest, I tried until the last moment to fix things between us. But he had already made up his mind. He told me that he had lost confidence in me and that our relationship no longer made sense. That hurt too much, especially because I loved him deeply, and I still feel that we could have resolved things more calmly. Though I guess he had already made his decision, and the only thing I could do was accept it. I must admit that despite everything that happened, he has behaved like a gentleman until the end. I don't know if I ever mentioned it clearly here, but since I moved with him to his country, I stopped working and he became the sole economic support of the household. That's why, when we agreed to divorce, one of my biggest fears was how I would return to my country without having to ask my parents for help, something that would have honestly been too humiliating for me. However, my husband solved that for me. He told me that he would take care of the cost of the plane ticket and that he would make sure I could return peacefully to my parents. He had no legal obligation to do it, but he did it anyway. That gesture, although kind, also hurt me quite a bit because it meant the definitive end of what we had built together. Before leaving for the airport, we had our last conversation, probably the most uncomfortable and painful of all. I told him that I was sorry things had ended this way, that I regretted having listened to so much bad advice, and especially having trusted the wrong people. He listened to me patiently, and although he was serious and distant, his answer left me somewhat calmer. Look, I sincerely want you to be happy. I hope you return to your family and you can start again from scratch. I don't hold grudges. I only wish the best for you. It was at that moment that I understood there was no turning back, but at least I knew that he didn't hate me, and that was a little consolation. I thanked him for the years together and apologized again for having allowed other people to negatively influence our relationship. It was uncomfortable to say, because admitting I was so easily influenced was also to recognize that perhaps I was naive to believe that those supposed friends really had good intentions with me. And here is where I want to speak clearly. It was those supposed friends I met in the community center's courses who ruined everything. I know that at some point I let myself be carried away by their advice, but how was I going to know they were guiding me so badly? I just wanted to fit in, to have new friends, and they took advantage of that to give me absurd ideas about how to manipulate my husband, using things that should never have been used as a game. Now that I'm sitting here in the airport, I see all this with more clarity. I guess trying to fit into a strange country made me let my guard down, trusting the wrong people and consequently ending up divorced and with nothing. My husband was always a good person with me, and although it hurts me that he didn't want to give us another chance, I recognize that at some point he was also a victim of these external manipulations. I know that I can't change the past, but I can warn anyone reading me. You have to be very careful with the advice you accept from others. Sometimes those who smile the most or seem to support us are precisely those who can destroy our happiness. Today I'm leaving with that bitter lesson learned. I don't want to blame myself anymore. I didn't ruin this on my own. If I hadn't listened to that absurd advice, I would still be happily married.